faithfully delivering value by interpreting great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, I'm diving into the book Obesity Code for you. The subtitle is The Secret to Weight Loss. So, what effective weight loss methods have you tried? Feel free to drop a comment and share your methods. The most common way to lose weight is to eat less and move more. The science behind this is the calorie theory. Calorie theory says fat's main job is storing calories. Too much fat comes from taking in more calories than you burn. So, we gotta eat less and exercise more to cut intake and boost burning. When you burn more calories than you take in, fat decreases. Yeah, lots of folks have lost weight this way, but many find the results not as great as hoped. Some hit a plateau where weight stops dropping, while others rebound, stuck in a cycle of losing and gaining. Right. For others, eating less and moving more barely works, with little weight change. Why is calorie theory's weight loss effect limited, and how can we really lose weight effectively? That's exactly what this book explores. The author Fung graduated from the University of Toronto Medical School and is a kidney doctor. Many of his patients have diabetes.
A common med for diabetes is insulin.
Many patients complain to Fung that insulin made him gain weight fast, and eating less plus exercising didn't help him slim down. So Fung got curious about what really causes obesity. He dug into tons of research and found many studies showing calorie theory has flaws, not matching human body rhythms. Plus, lots of evidence points to high insulin levels as the root cause of obesity. Only by lowering insulin can we effectively shed pounds. Today's book is Fung Zixin's full rundown on obesity research. It's got 20 chapters and 160,000 words. The author blends the latest studies and experiments to break down calorie theory's issues, explain insulin's role in obesity, and offer practical weight loss tips. Now, I'll cover the book's main points in 3 parts. First, what's wrong with calorie theory? Second, what causes obesity? Third, how to lose weight effectively. Okay, let's kick off with part 1. What's wrong with calorie theory? I'll explain it. The book defines obesity. A common measure is the body mass index, calculated as weight divided by height squared. Scores between 20 and 25 are normal, 25 to 30 is overweight, and over 30 is obese. This book's discussion on obesity refers to this exact definition. Calorie theory says obesity happens when calorie intake exceeds calorie expenditure, and weight loss requires cutting intake and boosting burning. Calorie intake comes from diet, while expenditure mainly covers physical activity and basal metabolism. Physical activity includes everyday stuff like walking, shopping, cleaning, as well as more intense sports. Basal metabolism handles unconscious body functions, like keeping the brain, heart, and organs running, building muscles and bones from nutrients, and regulating body temperature. And calorie theory has a core assumption. It thinks basal metabolism stays steady, so we can reduce intake and hike up expenditure by eating less and moving more. In other words, calorie theory treats intake and expenditure as 2 separate processes that can be tweaked independently. But many experiments show this assumption is wrong. Basal metabolism doesn't stay fixed. Intake and expenditure are tightly linked. Changing one triggers shifts in the other. The most famous of these is the Minnesota starvation experiment, led by American nutritionist Ansel Keys. It took place in 1944 at the University of Minnesota, aiming to study starvation's physical effects, the first comprehensive hunger research ever. Subjects were 36 young, healthy men, averaging 69.3 kilograms in weight. For the first 3 months, subjects ate normally, taking in 12,600 kilojoules daily. Next came a 6-month diet phase. Intake halved to 6,300 kilojoules per day, then dropped further to under 4,200 kilojoules, less than a third of normal. After dieting, subjects entered a 3-month recovery, gradually increasing intake back to normal levels. During the diet phase, Keys found subjects' basal metabolic rates dropped significantly. Their heart rate dropped by about 35% per minute,
strength decreased by 21%, and body temperature fell to 35.4 degrees Celsius.
Subjects commonly experienced dizziness, weakness, chills, fatigue, along with hair loss and brittle nails. Overall, when calorie intake halved, subjects' basal metabolic rate dropped by nearly 40%. Over time, the basal metabolic rate would drop even further. The same phenomenon appears in many diet studies. Reduced calorie intake leads to decreased expenditure. It's the body's defense mechanism. If intake decreases while expenditure stays constant, the body must break down fat and protein to compensate. But fat and protein stores are finite. To extend survival, the body reduces expenditure by lowering basal metabolism. It prioritizes surviving on limited intake, only breaking down reserves when necessary. That's why eating less initially causes weight loss. Because the body hasn't adapted yet, expenditure remains high, so fat gets broken down. But as basal metabolism drops, expenditure eventually falls to match intake or even dips slightly below. At that point, weight loss plateaus. Reduced calorie intake also alters hormone levels, increasing food cravings. A 2011 study analyzed dieters' hormonal changes. Results showed dieting increases hunger hormones while decreasing fullness hormones, meaning dieters get hungrier faster and feel less satisfied. Another study found reduced activity in dieters' self-control brain regions, weakening resistance to food temptations. These combined factors lead to uncontrollable overeating after prolonged dieting. With expenditure still low, weight naturally rebounds. So far, we've seen reduced eating lowers expenditure, making it ineffective. But actually, eating more increases expenditure too. In one experiment, researchers recruited prison inmates who had to overeat daily while restricted from exercise. At first, these inmates gain weight, but then it stabilizes at a certain level and stops changing. The inmates' calorie expenditure also increases noticeably. They feel more energetic. Although restricted from exercise, they walk and clean more.
Meanwhile, their appetite decreases. Some couldn't take it and binged, then dropped out of the experiment.
After returning to a normal diet, the inmates' weight and calorie expenditure gradually decrease back to original levels. That covers the impact of calorie intake on calorie expenditure. Next, let's look at how calorie expenditure affects intake. Basal metabolism isn't consciously controlled, so boosting expenditure relies on exercise. Scientists found that increasing exercise leads to higher calorie intake. We've all experienced better appetite after working out.
A Harvard School of Public Health study shows that 1 hour of exercise makes students consume an extra 1,200 kilojoules.
The author points out that it's actually tough to increase calorie expenditure through exercise because basal metabolism accounts for the bulk of it. The calorie expenditure added by exercise isn't significant. American anthropologist Herman Poncer studied a primitive tribe where people walk nearly 30 kilometers daily to gather food, way more activity than office-working Westerners. But Poncer found their total daily calorie expenditure is actually similar to Westerners. Other researchers analyzed calorie expenditure in wild animals and found it doesn't correlate much with activity levels. It's mainly determined by the animal's body fat percentage and environmental temperature. So even if someone exercises regularly, obesity can still occur.
A survey across 8 countries shows Americans exercise the most, Dutch the least, yet the obesity rate in the Netherlands is a third lower than in the US.
From these studies, it's clear that calorie intake and expenditure balance each other. The human body can't sustain low intake and high expenditure long term.
Therefore, whether you eat less or exercise more, weight loss effects are limited. Integrating related research, scientists propose a theory that body weight has a set point. If weight changes, the body works to restore it to the set point. When weight falls below the set point, calorie expenditure drops, appetite increases, so weight rises. When weight rises above the set point, calorie expenditure increases, appetite decreases, so weight drops. So the root cause of obesity is an elevated weight set point. All right, let's recap what we've covered in part 1. Calorie theory assumes basal metabolism is stable, treating calorie intake and expenditure as independent processes. But in reality, these processes are closely interconnected and influence each other. The human body has a weight set point. If weight changes, the body restores it to this set point. The fundamental cause of obesity is an elevated weight set point. Now for part 2. What causes obese individuals to have a higher set point? Scientists believe insulin is the primary regulator of the weight set point. Higher insulin levels elevate the set point, causing obesity. Insulin is a crucial hormone with two main functions. First, it facilitates glucose energy supply. Glucose is the body's primary energy source, mainly from carbohydrate digestion. With insulin, glucose enters cells from the bloodstream to provide energy. Insufficient insulin causes glucose buildup in blood while cells starve, leading to diabetes. That's why insulin injections are a common diabetes treatment. Insulin's second function is storing glucose. When carb intake produces more glucose than needed, insulin stores the excess for later use. Glucose first converts to glycogen in the liver, but liver storage is limited. Once full, excess glucose converts to fat in the liver and other areas. When glucose levels drop too low, glycogen breaks down first. After glycogen depletion, fat gets converted to glucose. During meals, insulin rises, promoting glucose energy use and storing excess glucose. Hours after eating, insulin levels decrease. Extensive research shows a strong link between insulin and obesity. For example, in a 1993 diabetes study, researchers divided patients with similar normal weights into two groups. One group received standard insulin doses, the other higher doses. Researchers tracked these patients. 6 years later, patients on high-dose insulin gained 4.5 kilograms more than others. There's also a rare condition called insulinoma, where patients produce excessive insulin. Meanwhile, most patients experience significant weight gain. A study examined 25 insulinoma patients' treatment. After tumor removal, 24 were cured successfully with rapid weight loss and no rebound. So, why does insulin cause obesity? It's a complex process involving many hormones and physiological mechanisms. Scientists don't have definitive answers yet. Higher insulin clearly leads to more fat storage, but that's just one mechanism. More connections need research. What's certain is elevated insulin causes obesity. So what factors boost insulin levels? The author notes 2 factors. First is diet. All foods raise insulin, but to varying degrees.
Insulin primarily acts on glucose, which mainly comes from digesting carbs.
Higher carb foods have more pronounced insulin-raising effects. Many food companies now refine and concentrate foods by removing fiber, fats, etc., keeping only carb-rich parts. This processed food is refined carbohydrates, but those removed components play vital roles. Take dietary fiber. It increases food volume and enhances satiety. For example, orange pulp is mostly fiber. Normally, you might eat 2 or 3 oranges before feeling full. But remove pulp to make juice. 1 glass contains carbs from 3 or 4 oranges. Drinking 2 or 3 glasses is easy. Switching from oranges to juice multiplies carb intake, spiking insulin. Common refined carbs include artificial sugars and white flour. Artificial sugars are manufactured sweeteners, like white sugar for cooking or jam on bread. White flour comes from wheat endosperm. Regular flour without specification is usually white flour. For more concrete examples, refined carbs include fruit juice, soda, bread, noodles, cookies, chocolate cake, ice cream, etc. They're either made from white flour or contain added sugars. Both significantly spike insulin and increase obesity risk. The second factor is insulin resistance. For insulin to move glucose into cells, it must first bind to insulin receptors on cells. The author uses an analogy. Insulin is the key, cell receptors are the lock. Only when matched does the glucose gate open. Insulin resistance means cell receptors become less sensitive to insulin, preventing the gate from fully opening. Normally, 1 key opens 1 lock for 2 glucose molecules. With resistance, 1 key only moves 1 molecule, so the body secretes more insulin to force the lock. Eventually, the gate opens for both molecules. This elevated insulin causes obesity, but what causes insulin resistance? Scientists find that prolonged high insulin levels reduce receptor sensitivity, causing resistance. It's like how new drinkers get drunk quickly on few drinks, but regular drinking builds tolerance. You need more for the same effect. Similarly, insulin resistance triggers even higher insulin levels, creating a vicious cycle. Even with diet control, insulin remains elevated at this stage. The author notes insulin resistance is common in long-term obese individuals, 10 or more years. Two main factors drive insulin resistance prevalence. First, increased eating frequency. Take 1970s-80s America. Most ate 3 meals daily with no snacks. Insulin only spiked during or after meals, about 10 hours total daily. It stayed low otherwise, preventing resistance.
But in the 1990s, snacking culture exploded.
Meanwhile, society has promoted the idea that eating small, frequent meals is healthy, even though there's no scientific basis. Many people still increase their meal frequency. A 2003 survey showed that, including snacks and extra meals, most Americans eat 5 to 6 times a day. And in the American diet, refined carbohydrates make up a large proportion. And so throughout the day, except when sleeping, Americans have high insulin levels, making them prone to insulin resistance. The prevalence of insulin resistance. The second reason is the popularity of artificial sugars. They not only raise insulin levels, but also make insulin resistance more likely. This is related to a sugar called fructose. Fructose is similar to glucose, a very simple structured sugar. When a glucose molecule combines with a fructose molecule, it forms a sucrose molecule. Sucrose is one of the most common artificial sugars. After entering the body, sucrose is broken down into glucose and fructose. As mentioned earlier, glucose has diverse metabolic pathways. It can enter cells for energy, be converted to glycogen and fat in the liver, or turn into fat in other organs. But fructose can only be converted to fat in the liver, so it puts a lot of stress on the liver. The more fructose consumed, the more fat builds up in the liver, and the less efficiently the liver converts fructose to fat. It's like a warehouse already stuffed with goods. New goods can't be squeezed in easily. So the body secretes more insulin to force the liver to keep converting fructose to fat. In this process, with insulin chronically high, insulin resistance becomes likely. As early as the 1980s, scientists discovered the dangers of fructose. In one experiment, researchers gave healthy subjects 100 grams of fructose or glucose daily. After 7 days, they tested insulin sensitivity and found no change in glucose takers, but a 25% drop in fructose takers. All right, with that said, let's summarize part 2. The primary regulator of the weight set point is insulin. Higher insulin levels raise the set point, causing obesity. Refined carbohydrates significantly elevate insulin levels. Additionally, frequent daily eating and artificial sugar intake both lead to insulin resistance, further increasing insulin levels. Next, in part 3, we'll discuss how to lower insulin levels to achieve truly effective weight loss. The author's suggestions can be summarized into 5 points. The first is to reduce artificial sugar intake. Artificial sugar is a refined carbohydrate that significantly increases insulin levels and causes insulin resistance. The author advises, if you can avoid it, don't eat it. Specifically, we shouldn't actively add artificial sugar to any foods. Most processed snacks, pastries, and beverages already contain a lot of artificial sugar and should be avoided. If you want to eat something between meals, you can have nuts and fresh fruits. The natural sugar content in these foods is much lower than artificial sugar. If you want to drink other than plain water, the author recommends green tea. Many studies indicate that green tea helps lower glucose levels, promote fat breakdown, and reduce cancer risk. The second suggestion for weight loss is to reduce white flour intake. Most baked goods are made from white flour, including various breads, pies, cakes, etc., and it's best not to eat them. If you really want to eat them, you can choose whole wheat flour, which is made from the entire wheat grain, retaining more nutrients.
For example, dietary fiber and vitamins.
Compared to white flour, whole wheat flour has a lower effect on raising insulin. To clarify, the author opposes refined carbohydrates but does not oppose carbohydrate intake. Carbohydrates are essential nutrients for the body. The author advocates eating unprocessed, carbohydrate-rich whole foods. Vegetables are a good choice, such as eggplant, spinach, asparagus, carrots, tomatoes, etc. Compared to refined carbohydrates, vegetables have a lower effect on raising insulin and won't cause obesity. The third suggestion for weight loss is to moderately consume protein. As mentioned earlier, all foods raise insulin levels, and protein is no exception. Common sources of protein are meat and dairy products. Research has found that both meat and dairy products significantly increase insulin levels, but compared to refined carbohydrates, that should be avoided entirely. Meat and dairy products can be eaten in moderation because both have strong satiety effects. In reality, a person can't eat much snacks in a day. Juice is easy to get addicted to, allowing continuous consumption that keeps insulin levels high. But after a few pieces of steak, you'll feel stuffed and not want to eat more. Insulin rises for a bit and then drops back down.
Moreover, protein is an essential nutrient for the body. You can't avoid consuming it.
As long as we control protein intake and avoid binge eating, it's not easy to trigger obesity. The author suggests keeping protein intake around 20% to 30% of total food consumption. The fourth weight loss tip is to increase dietary fat intake. Dietary fat is natural fat in foods, and people often link fat to obesity, which is a misconception. In the 1950s, it was proposed that dietary fat raises cholesterol levels, leading to heart disease. Thus, dietary fat got a bad rap, and people also thought it causes obesity, but these views lack scientific evidence. Research over recent decades consistently shows dietary fat has no link to heart disease or obesity. It only slightly boosts insulin levels, far less than carbs or protein. I love the office wall.
Dr. Walter Willett from Harvard University is an authority in nutrition science.
He clearly stated that dietary fat has no effect whatsoever on obesity. Additionally, many studies find dietary fat benefits health, like whole milk lowering diabetes risk and olive oil preventing heart disease and stroke, so feel free to consume it. Note that we should choose unchemically processed dietary fats, as processed ones may have harmful additives. So-called refined olive oil on the market is chemically processed. The author recommends buying extra virgin olive oil. This olive oil is made by crushing olives and directly extracting the oil, with no added ingredients.
Weight loss.
The fifth suggestion is intermittent fasting, meaning not eating anything for a period. The first 4 tips relate to diet structure, but for long-term obese people with insulin resistance, even changing diet, insulin stays high due to a vicious cycle of elevated insulin and resistance reinforcing each other. To break this cycle, we need the body in a very low insulin state to restore cell receptor sensitivity. Since all foods raise insulin, the only way is to eat nothing. After a while, insulin levels naturally drop. The author's intermittent fasting means fasting for 24 or 36 hours, 2 to 3 times a week. For 24-hour fasting, it means you eat dinner today, then don't eat again until tomorrow's dinner. For 36-hour fasting, it means eating dinner today, then not eating until the morning after tomorrow. During fasting, you can drink calorie-free drinks like plain water and green tea. Lots of studies confirm fasting can effectively lower insulin levels and reduce insulin resistance. Fasting and dieting seem similar. Both cut down on eating, but their effects are way different. Say there are 2 long-term obese folks. One fasts twice a week for 24 hours each time and eats normally otherwise. The other uses a dieting approach, eating less at every meal. In the first few months, both might lose similar weight, but during this, the faster's insulin resistance eases and levels drop, while the dieter's levels stay the same. Well, Over time, the dieter's weight rebounds, but the faster with lower insulin keeps losing weight without bouncing back. When it comes to fasting, people often have worries. Here, I'll cover 3 common concerns and the author's replies. The first concern is that fasting might lower basal metabolism, like in the Minnesota starvation experiment. The author notes that the body distinguishes between dieting and fasting and responds differently. During dieting, there's regular calorie intake, so the body lowers basal metabolism based on intake, delaying fat breakdown. But during fasting, calorie intake is zero, so the body must rely on breaking down
Fat to provide energy.
without calorie intake as a reference. The body doesn't need to deliberately lower basal metabolism. The author also reminds us that in primitive societies, food was unstable, often scarce. If going hungry for a day or two caused metabolic drops, dizziness, and fatigue, primitive people wouldn't have energy to hunt and would have died out. Facts also showed that fasting doesn't lower basal metabolic rate. A study analyzed alternate day fasting's effect on calorie expenditure. Over 22 days, it showed no drop in basal metabolic rate during fasting. The second concern about fasting is worrying the body will break down muscle for energy. Actually, the body has ample fat reserves to provide energy for extended periods. Only in extreme starvation scenarios, continuous hunger until body fat drops below 4%, does muscle breakdown begin. The author's recommended intermittent fasting, just 2 to 3 times weekly, is nowhere near such extremes. The third fasting concern is fearing overwhelming hunger pangs. According to the author, hunger doesn't persist indefinitely. It naturally subsides after enduring it briefly. These combined factors lead to uncontrollable overeating after prolonged dieting. With expenditure still low, weight naturally rebounds. So far, we've seen reduced eating lowers expenditure, making it ineffective. But actually, eating more increases expenditure too. In one experiment, researchers recruited prison inmates who had to overeat daily while restricted from exercise. At first, these inmates gained weight, but then it stabilized at a certain level and stopped changing. The inmates' calorie expenditure also increased noticeably. They felt more energetic. Although restricted from exercise, they walked and cleaned more.
Meanwhile, their appetite decreased. Some couldn't take it and binged, then dropped out of the experiment.
After returning to a normal diet, the inmates' weight and calorie expenditure gradually decreased back to original levels. Oh, that covers the impact of calorie intake on calorie expenditure. Next, let's look at how calorie expenditure affects intake. Basal metabolism isn't consciously controlled, so boosting expenditure relies on exercise. Scientists found that increasing exercise leads to higher calorie intake. We've all experienced better appetite after working out. A Harvard School of Public Health study shows that 1 hour of exercise makes students consume an extra 1,200 kilojoules. The author points out it's actually tough to increase calorie expenditure through exercise because basal metabolism accounts for the bulk. The calorie expenditure added by exercise isn't significant. American anthropologist Herman Pontzer studied a primitive tribe where people walk nearly 30 kilometers daily to gather food. Way more activity than office-working Westerners.
But Ponzer found their total daily calorie expenditure is actually similar to Westerners.
Other researchers analyzed calorie expenditure in wild animals and found it doesn't correlate much with activity levels. So,